Lee ACP. This is currently how I'm priming. I've done some videos on it. I'm not going to go over the usage, like I've done enough videos on that, but I'm going to show you some tweaks that I've done to it and cover a couple of the most common things that people have asked me about what I do. The first one is, how do I adjust my actual primer depth on it? Because as it comes from the factory, it's not designed to have an adjustable seating depth on the primer. And that's because normally you have this piece which threads into the bottom, and then there is your seating stem, a spring, and then the actual platform piece here. And I guess technically if you were skilled on a lathe, you could make new stems that were different lengths, and that would be fine. But other than that, there's no way to do this straight from the factory. But there's an easy way to hack it. So because this unit is designed to decap as well, there's already a hole down the middle of this because that's where your primer would eject. So I went to the store and bought a 5/16 24, I believe. Let me double check. 5/16 24 tap, and it just barely fits inside of this hole. And I was able to just run my tap in there with my tap handle and just come on out. And then it went to the store when I got the tap and picked up a 5/16 24 bolt and a lock nut. Now the lock nut's important because that's going to be actually what fixes your seating depth. But now I can screw this in. And it's kind of like I got the idea from a friend who had seen the Henderson and kind of thought, well, we could kind of use the same principle, and yeah, he's right. But what happens is it just pushes that in and then pushes up on that stem. Now you're probably saying, well, couldn't you just build up this? Well, yeah, and it works okay. I've done it, but eventually it compresses out, and it's not real easy to make small adjustments with, whereas with the screw, super easy to do. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to show you real quick without it and then with it, and the difference that we can get. I'm not going to go through like a whole thing, but let's just throw this in. All right, and I'm just going to load a single primer in here. And then we're just going to put a piece of brass in. Okay. And that'll be at 3/1000ths, right? So this thing, I've shown you guys in other videos. This thing is stupid repeatable at 3/1000ths. But watch this. All I have to do now is take this and a little crescent wrench, and I'm just going to kind of exaggerate what I've got there. And now if I screw this into the bottom till it stops, I can make easy adjustments on it. Okay, so there it goes. It's just, snug. And I'm going to go ahead and put it back in. Okay, and then let me decap this real quick. So we were at 3/1000ths. Now I'm at 11.5 So obviously that's a pretty big extreme. Now, one thing you need to be careful of is, depending on how deep you have that pin, it's going to affect how the primer sits. So there is kind of a sweet spot. 11/1000ths, that primer was sitting a little bit above flush in the cup. You got to be careful with it, and it's not made to do this. So you got to be careful. But you can technically adjust it. Realistically, most people are going to be at maybe 6, 7, 8/1000ths, and I haven't seen a problem there. But just keep an eye out as far as feeding goes, because you could have a problem with it being flush. You could probably fix that by adjusting another piece on it. I just haven't done it. And again, I got to be honest, I don't really use this adjustment anymore. I've just gone back to the factory 3/1000ths because honestly, I just find that it works really good. But if I am testing something, it's nice to be able to do this. I have done testing where I want to have, 6 or 9/1000ths, and being able to easily adjust this is all I need to do. Now, if I don't want to use it, I can go right back to my factory setting, and there's my 3/1000. So that's the first adjustment, and these things are really cheap. You can go to Ace or Home Depot and buy one of these taps, and I want to say they're like, I don't know, $12 or $15 at the most. and then $1 something for the bolt and nut. So very simple fix that gives you a ton of adjustability if that's something you want. Two other things that I've done just to help with making this more functional. The first is, and I'm going to pull out this Allen wrench, and it's not the most eloquent solution, but it is certainly one that works, is this piece right here. As you use it, it wants to back off a little bit, and eventually I have in mid priming, I've had this thing pop off and go flying. But even if it loosens up a little bit, you're technically backing off the amount of pressure that it's going to apply to the inside of the case, and that can make your seating depth fluctuate just a little bit. So originally I had just put a black marker here so I could keep an eye on getting it, like, okay, is it still lined up? Is it still lined up? But eventually what I did is, because this thing's ribbed, I just made a mark and then took a little drill bit and drilled a tiny hole. And all it does now is I take this Allen, just a small Allen wrench that I had sitting around, and it goes in the hole, and it sits right in the rib right here, so that it physically can't back off or loosen anymore. Now I know people are going to look at this and go, well, that's stupid, you shouldn't have to do it. Well, that's not really the point. I happen to really like how this tool works, and if I have to make a couple tweaks to it, so be it. So anyway, that Allen wrench stays out of my way. It's never interfering, but this thing also never budges on me, so that's fantastic. The next thing is this spring. Occasionally that spring will want to walk around like this to where it doesn't always come back. See how it kind of was on the side? All I did, again, not a super elegant solution, but I just cut the end off a Q-tip. I put the spring where I want it, and I just wedge this thing in there. So that's why if you ever see my videos and you're wondering what that white thing is, it's just a Q-tip head. So now the spring can't easily get walked around to the other side, and that keeps it there. The last thing, and this is going to be harder to show, but over on this side here, there's a little piece of plastic. I just cut it out of a powder jug, and I taped it on there, and it's basically just a flap, so that when this comes down, if you see, the flap is now down here. And because I'm loading longer rifle brass, okay, so when the rifle brass comes in, sometimes it wants to kind of angle out because these holders aren't great for tall cartridges. And this just provides a little bit of a backstop so that when the brass is coming down, it has to land in the claws, and it just makes life a little bit easier. So there's that. So those are the three big things that I have done. Whoops, sorry about that. Those are the three big changes that I have made to use this on a regular basis. They're not major. They're very simple, inexpensive fixes, but for me, they've made a world of difference on this. So again, I'm sorry it's taken so long. I know I've had a lot of people asking since I put out the first video about what I've done to tweak it, but there's my three tweaks that I think really make a huge difference on the ACP from my perspective. Hopefully at least one of them helps, maybe a couple of them. And if you have questions, hit me up in the comments below. You guys have a good one. We'll talk later.